Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Edgevana Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Thiele, and joining me today is Eric Pulier of Vatom Inc. Eric,
hi.
Amazing to see you again. I can't wait to have this conversation. It's been way too long.
It has.
I don't know how that big brain fits in a relatively moderate-sized head, but I'm looking forward to coaxing some of that out relative to this conversation. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days and who you are.
Sure. Yeah, it's been too long. I'm really happy that we have this chance to catch up, and actually fascinated with what you're doing as well. And so it's great to see how these things converge. So what I've been doing is really building what I believe, or I would say I'm collaborating on building what I believe is the next generation of the World Wide Web. And as you know, the World Wide Web had some impact on the way we live, work, and play globally. And that impact is something that we can all be proud to have had something to do with over the years. You know, the early stages of convincing people to get a website and to standardize on TCP/IP and various milestones along the way, from APIs to open source to everything as a service, cloud. Where we are now is not just a next step of the evolution, but it's a serious sea change. And it really represents, yes, it's an evolution, but it's not just an ordinary step like these incremental steps that we've seen in recent years. And that's what gets us so excited. So what I'm working on in kind of common parlance now is this emergence of an NFT metaverse. But what I really think of it as is a continuum from the work that we've done. In fact, the work that we've done together. And we'll get into it a little bit, but this is my 15th company, and by far the one that's the most fun, and I hope the most impactful.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to hear more about it. I mean, the conversation we had before, just in getting up to date with each other and considering this podcast, was fascinating. And as you know, as a casual observer, and maybe people would mock me a little bit for saying I'm a casual observer as compared to what a real casual observer would be of Metaverse. But nonetheless, casual as compared to you, my mind was racing after our last conversation. It was racing in our prep 2 minutes before we started the call today in all the different things that I would be interested in. And I'm going to make some assumptions. Don't be afraid to pull me back and set me straight. But I see the metaverse, and I'm going to repeat what we talked about the first time we chatted. I see the metaverse as potentially being that web page that if you're a mid-sized company and you didn't have it in 1998, you didn't exist. That will soon be the metaverse. But I want to bring some on the ground kind of feet on the pavement thought and say, Eric, I loved what you were doing when we were working together. I mean, it was the most forward-thinking cloud management solution, certainly of its time, and probably for the next 6 years. That being said, are we early in the metaverse? Or is what you're doing early? Because you could argue you were 8 years early in what you were building for cloud management.
Yeah, well, I guess one could argue that. I don't think we're early. We were early for sure in 2015 when I proposed putting forward a non-fungible version of Bitcoin, or a non-fungible capability to apply to Ethereum. The collaborators that we had at the time, Craig Sellers and Reeve Collins and Lucas Fleury and Gunther Thiel, and the people that rallied around this concept, they saw a vision of a future where things made out of bits would have no less value in the human brain than things made out of atoms. And that's why I coined the phrase Vatom, virtual atom. That, and because people thought I was too nerdy when I was saying non-fungible tokens. No one thought that nutty phrase, nobody will ever catch that on. Meanwhile, I go to Art Basel and it's NFT everywhere. No one cares about regular art. So the evolution of this concept has really come a long way. in what has it been now, early 2015, so almost 7 years.
Yeah.
What we've been working on, though, is not this quick get rich quick scheme stuff. Yes, we believe, I'm very happy for people who bought low on, you know, an NBA Top Shot and sold high on et cetera. That's wonderful for them. But at the same time, this notion of speculative frenzy is encouraging only because it's one element of engagement. And what we believe, and what I believe, is that it's a pillar in a much larger picture of what's going to be the next generation of human engagement, what draws you in, what keeps you there, what makes you interested, and what's the utility for our lives. So there is an element of buying and selling and that hype around that. I'm not going to denigrate the people who are all in on that, because first of all, make a living if you can. But the next thing is like, what end? What's lasting? And what are the elements that we're laying down here that are going to have an effect across all the sectors of society, no less impactful than what the web brought? And right. What we see, and certainly what I believe, is that NFTs and decentralized finance and token models combined with AR and VR and the underlying elements, which are not technical, but more science around gamification, are going to now converge on a social experience that is deeper, more enriching, and more practical in many ways than the web today. And if you look at the evolution of communication styles and tools, you will see a lot of excitement right now around what you might call Fortnite back, or games that people play and they say, okay, that's a picture of the metaverse. And I don't disagree to some extent that there's value in that, and it's going to become a massive business. I mean, you can look at Fortnite and just look at the exponential curve around it. Right. But look at something bigger and where we're going with that. The telephone. A friend of mine, Mark Jeffrey, who's a brilliant guy who created one of the first metaverses, the Palace, back in, I think it was 1994 or 5. You know, he really has boiled it down to the essence. What about a more interesting telephone? What is it about the telephone that when we get on it, we're talking about our kids and our lives and ideas, but we're not saying like, oh my God, this is amazing, right? We're not distracted from the human connection. We're being drawn deeper. Of course, there's nothing that will replace being there in person, but the next best thing is a telephone. And, you know, to some extent, Zoom is an enhancement to a telephone. In some ways, it takes away certain things because it makes you, it exhausts you and traps you in a box without agency and spontaneity. But in some ways, it advances it. But what if we start to learn about what is the essence of human communication, connection, collaboration, and then the other elements that you can bring in? You know, what motivates you to move forward? How do you earn money? How do you create this, or I guess harness this interest to speculate on objects and to own things? As you add certain basic primitives to the web, people, places, and things, and then you start to understand what that could mean, to me, that's the metaverse. And so, you know, a long way of answering your question, are we too early? I would say no. Were we too early when, you know, the web, which was static pages, and people came along and said, what if we could generate them with databases and create user-generated content? When people said, well, you know, a lot of people said, well, we're not ready for that. But the people who jumped on it, their businesses skyrocketed. Same thing with commerce. Same thing with semantic and AI-driven, you know, capabilities within the web. Here we have a clearly more powerful, more effective way to leverage internet technologies. We are not too early unless it doesn't work. And over the last 5 years, I can tell you, because we can give you examples at scale, that it works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even the short example that you gave me, Eric, made me believe that as a CEO, I would be a failure if I wasn't using this technology as my company grew, right? Whether it was for bringing the team together, whether it was for helping to host events, giving people a richer experience for how they could explore the services that we offer, how those services could be put together. My mind was reeling with the potential options that are exactly what a visual oriented learner like I am relate to, right?
That's right. And let's think about that. So a visual oriented learner. So what that implies is a couple of things. The first thing is that there's a learner, a human. The next thing is that you're taking input that's coming visually and obviously through auditory means, and you're consolidating that into something that you're hoping will be remembered, something that goes from short-term to long-term memory. Yep. Well, how are you going to get that information to somebody? How are you going to keep them interested? And then how are you going to get them motivated to go to the next thing to learn? Right. We have learned a lot about these various mechanisms. We've also learned what bores people to tears and creates, what's called Zoom fatigue and your mind wandering and the lack of recall. So when we take these lessons to heart, there's a couple things that are worth noting. The first thing is you can only stream video, visual or not, to somebody for so long before their mind wanders onto something else, unless you're an incredibly compelling storyteller. If you're going to hire Martin Scorsese to run your business meetings and give him a $100 million budget, you're probably going to retain a lot of attention. Absent that, you're going to have to break it up into bite-sized chunks of things to remember and have a reward system that you get something for achieving that, whether that's in the non-fungible form of let's say a Vatom or something of a badge of sorts, or a token, a tokenized economy that people can rely on, that value will mean something to them in the future that will propel them forward. So the elements of a metaverse start to address these issues. They don't replace, by the way, existing things like Zoom, for instance. I think Zoom has a role and will evolve to become better and better. One of the ways it evolves to become better and better, as with Microsoft Teams and things like that, is it will augment this experience with an experience that has agency, that allows you to feel like you can tap into this conversation for a bit, get what you need from it, move into something, run into people in a spontaneous manner, hit on surprise and delight mechanisms where the brain says, okay, that was worth exploring. I'm interested in going for the next thing, and that was worth my time. And then look at your wallet at the end of it and say, I got more coming out than I did going in. Yeah. Right? There's nothing more important in the human experience than time. The right. most important, scarcest resource we have. If you're going to ask somebody for some of that, you better give them something damn important. And it's hard to convince somebody that they've actually achieved that equation successfully. These mechanisms are starting to do that, and starting to do it taking into account the type of attention spans we have, the type of motivations we have, which ultimately don't come down to how beautiful the scenery is, as much as that's what most people are focused on. They really do come down to how intimately we've connected with another human being.
Yeah, it makes total sense, and I couldn't agree more. And I again, you mentioned Zoom, and we used Zoom in order to access the metaverse that you've been working on. And that agency you talked about, the ability to move from room to room, while Zoom may be still the conduit and the presenter, the ability to leverage the environment to create the equivalent of a gathering that had the tenets of a real gathering, just without the atoms as you describe it. I think was really important, and I can't imagine a forward-thinking event occurring 2 years from now that doesn't have some or all of its options available via metaverse.
Agreed. Yeah, when you asked earlier, is the metaverse the internet reborn? It's really not. It's the internet grown up. Yeah. Internet matured, come to fruition with its promise. At least when I first heard of maybe not the internet, but the web, the promise to me was, oh my gosh, every person on earth can now express themselves, put something forward that on any device without needing to know who they are and communicate related to compatibility of technology, they can now consume this content. They can know about me, about my business. They can even interact with my business and do business with me. So that prospect of every person being their own network, being their own creator in their own business, it's fallen short, but even in falling short has transformed our economy and our lives as we know it. But now what if that were to come to fruition and every individual can become a creator?
Yeah.
We're moving into a model of a next generation economy that people don't really understand yet how significant this shift is going to be. This is not a matter of, oh, wow, now my business can run X% more efficiently. It's more like, why do I have a business structured like this at all? Who owns this business? How are the participants who are the customers actually, how are they respected as potential shareholders and drivers of what this business should become and the beneficiaries of the success of the enterprise? Like these notions of decentralized autonomous organizations, this is not science fiction. This is here today in its nascent form, admittedly, but with enough of a peek behind the curtain that we know that that's going to get ripped off pretty darn quickly. The notion of decentralizing the financial instruments that allow these units of value to transfer between people, and how the decentralized finance, so let's say DEXs are running, and how people are structuring their offerings and their businesses. Every aspect of this is being rethought. And one thing I'll tell you, if you look ahead, as scary as it is for a lot of existing institutions, there's no doubt in my mind that we're heading towards a better future, not just a different one, but a future where more people are empowered to live more purposeful lives with integrity, where people are not going around looking for solutions like universal basic income, but applying universal basic creativity and applying these opportunities to empower individuals to express themselves and get paid. Express yourself, do an instrument of work or a unit of work, and get paid. That is a fundamentally important part of where this metaverse concept is going. If you look at the enterprise, while these might be highfalutin kind of like shifts that threaten people that say, well, that's not how we want to do things, we need to preserve our base, et cetera, it's not scary. What you can actually see is already the signs that companies that adopt these principles will remain companies. It's not going to threaten you. It's just going to make you a stronger company. Ultimately, companies are made up of people in general. And those people need to be kept in a state where they're being incentivized, where they're creative, where they're interacting with each other better and advancing and innovating together. So I think that these technologies are going to do that for the enterprise.
I would agree with that. I mean, and even just taking it down to, really down to earth point of perspective is one of the conversations that I've been in a lot, especially since I made a couple of prognostications very early on last year at the beginning of the pandemic. And I said two things were likely to occur, is that something north of 20% of people will probably never go back into an office, or will only go back in very occasionally after this is done. And then I also suggested that activities like digital transformation, edge computing, et cetera, cloud adoption would be accelerated, probably by several years. Yeah. And I think it's pretty safe to argue that regardless of whether my metrics were 100% accurate, that the notion behind the thought was accurate. And so when I look at Metaverse, in fact, it might have been the first thing that came to mind when you were showing it to me, is I think, how can this solve one of those fundamental issues of working from home, where you really just can't ever feel like you're unhandcuffed when you're working with others, right? I mean, the natural flow of conversation, the ability to turn around from a conference table and sketch something stupid on the whiteboard, and then talk about it and have somebody else add their perspective to it. All of those activities in today's tools are difficult and cumbersome at best. And it seems like the metaverse is kind of a natural opportunity space for that. Does that make sense? Am I going the wrong direction?
It makes perfect sense to me. One of the things that will find as this advances is we are also going to get better at the high fidelity, extremely fast frame rendering capabilities, cloud distribution, obviously the edge networks that will allow us to overcome speed of light issues. And you'll start to get better and better fidelity for, holographic style collaboration, where we really feel like we're in the same room together, collaborating on the same things together. That's happening, and it will happen faster than people think. However, what is not widely understood is that some of the key elements of what's going to make that successful are already here. I look forward to a day when I can have lighter and lighter head-mounted displays, that I can have truly immersive environments and I could experience you in 3D as opposed to a 2D projection, and where we're in a shared room. But at the same time, I can tell you right now, today, we can use existing technologies to gain a large amount of that value to a much more widely accessible audience. Because even when those technologies mature sufficiently, there's still going to be issues, right? For quite a number of years. People have to get used to putting something on their head. It has to get lighter and lighter. You have to democratize that out cheaper and cheaper so that everybody has one, that everyone gets used to it, and et cetera. Yep. As those years unfold, we do not have to wait.
Right.
In the interim, the laptop, the phone, these things are good enough devices with the new technologies, what you might call Web3 technologies applied, to actually affect, I would say, the majority of the benefits today. And when you think about, so what are those benefits? The benefits are a sense of having been there together. When you watch a concert, for instance, with a stream, you will get bored very quickly if it's a stream. What you want, what you will remember, and what will bring you back the next time is who were you there with, and what did you do? What games did you play? What jokes did you share? What laughs did you have? What adventures did you go on? Not how much of that stream did you focus on and actually see people playing their guitars or what have you. That'll get old. Similarly, in the business world, what did you work on together? What do you remember about it? What information was imparted? What did you gain from that? Did you give karma points to somebody? Did you gain a badge? Did you achieve a certain level of a goal and then move on to the next thing and remember that? And did you have some contextual relevance that sipped into your brain that allowed you to recall it? And were you able to find that person again? One of the things that we have to go back to the early days of the internet. You remember the old IM clients that came out early? Yep. We used to use that to find out if we were, if somebody was available.
Right.
And it would say a little green if they were on or off, and then we would, talk to them. Some of that needs to come back now, right? Yeah. Because if you go into some of these metaverses today, they'll tell you whether there's an art gallery on or off, maybe, but they won't tell you whether Mark is here and whether he's talking to so-and-so and he's made himself available to join the conversation. The right. Human element, if we go human in versus shooting people back, yep. The game mentality back. It's kind of like Zoom versus Doom. Doom's a great game running through and trying to find things to shoot, etc. But Zoom is about humans, and we can enhance that to bring that humanity back into every aspect of what we do, including the metaverse. And I believe the new intranet will be the enterprise metaverse for that reason.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And we've already hit almost a full half hour of conversation, and I feel like we've barely scratched the surface. So don't be surprised if I pester you to come back and do another one of these.
I'd love to.
But before we go, some down-to-earth thinking on, I'm a CIO at an enterprise or a CEO at an enterprise. How do I start thinking about this? Is this a major philosophical head change, or is this more of you just need to dive in and start thinking about how to use it?
It's the latter. It's a very small step to learn. This is how we always advise CIOs and CEOs to put their toe in the water and understand. You can only understand so much by reading about it or going to seminars. You have to try it. In this case, it happens to be super simple because this is not a matter of saying, do I want to use Slack or a metaverse or Teams or Zoom or a metaverse? This is more about how do we augment our existing collaboration suite and the ways that we communicate with something like this. And because you can use the best of these, certainly the ones that we're supporting and looking to bring into the world without any significant downloads or clients or complex technologies that you have to vet for security, et cetera. You know, to the extent that you already allow white lists of web pages into your world, then this is a better website. It's a more rich, more engaging way to use the web to connect your people and create lasting experiences that can affect your business. So why not introduce this kind of web experience as an augmentation to what you already have in an experimental form? One thing I can tell you for sure, if you don't do that, you'll be in the minority pretty soon.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, and it's ironic, and I think we talked about this when we spoke a couple of weeks ago about the comparison I make in thinking about Edge and now the metaverse is that, you know, in 1993, we began to collect the tools and the standards that allowed for anyone, anywhere to look at anything, anywhere, right, on the web. We had HTTP, we had HTTPS, we had lower cost bandwidth going into the home, we had more mobile devices. All of those things came together to lower the barrier to entry for the development of the internet. And what was amazing is that in 1993, the internet was still a toy. It was literally a toy for geeks. And by 1997, to the point you made earlier, if you were a mid-sized company and you didn't have a website, you didn't exist. Right. And you know, I can visualize, even for our own small little Edgevana, I could visualize someone coming into our metaverse and having my VP of customer success or one of my technical architects walk them through as if in person in the metaverse, pulling together options for their need, right? As opposed to doing a freaking chat bot or sending an email or something like that. So I really do think this is powerful. Folks, I recommend, I don't usually do this, but I'm doing it because I think that this is such an important area of development for all of us to consider. Not whether you like it or not is immaterial. It's whether you want to stay in business or not is what is the question. I highly recommend taking a look at what Eric's doing. And Eric, you know, before we wrap up, give us a little bit about how people can find you and what to expect.
So you'll see our website and web presence changing in the coming 3 months or so as we come increasingly out of stealth mode into showcasing the technologies and capabilities we've been building with our partners at BlockV and our partners at High Fidelity and our partners around the world in various capacities that have infused various pieces of what is now becoming a synthesized, I would say, platform that everyone can build on, the same way that you build on the web. Our philosophy, which I think is a little different than many, is that if you're not open and if you're not a developer community, then you're basically yet another game, another silo. But if you want to evolve the web, then you want to open it up for people to build. And so to your audience, what I would suggest is start, you can contact us, you can go to vatom.com, see some of the initial tools that are out there, get a sense of where we're going, and contact us for a demo and to play with it yourself. You can already start development, but in the coming months, this will truly be open for everybody.
That's fantastic. Eric, I really appreciate you taking the time today to join me. It was great seeing you again. And I was serious before. I think we touched on a quarter of what I would have liked to have touched on today. So don't be surprised if I ring you up again in a month or so and ask for another half hour.
Thanks, Mark. I look forward to it. And notwithstanding our enthusiasm for the metaverse, I'd love to see you in person.
Oh, same here, same here. So we'll make that happen. I mean, I'm only a 4-hour drive from LA, so we can make something work. Or you can come up and lose some money in the casino.
Like that idea.
Either way. So folks, thank you very much for joining us. Again, it's Mark Thiele, your host. Appreciate you joining another Edgevana podcast. If you have Anyone you'd like to recommend for our podcast, please feel free to send us an email. Until next time, again, thank you for listening. And Eric, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Love being here.